Mute is an operator with a variety of different applications, including wall denial. When it comes to something like a castle barricade, you can use a mute jammer to partially defend the castle barricade. This will make it to where it's harder for someone to actually place down a breach charge and blow it up. Or if somebody is an Ash and they don't properly place their Ash charge and they just fire it in the middle instead of at the top, it will jam the Ash charge. In certain situations such as this, Mute also is capable of jamming windows as well. There's certain places like this that give almost full protection to windows with castle barricades on them, also making it to where they are forced to hit it open and waste time. And of course, Mute is able to jam drones and cams and other forms of electronics that have nothing to do with wall or door denial. Also, has a unique advantage over Bandit strictly with wall denial as well. And the first thing is wall prioritization. Now, the obvious thing that everyone knows to do is to just put a mute jammer directly in the middle of two walls, and it does give a decent level of protection. Now, barricades like this, single barricades, have different lengths. Some are slightly shorter and slightly longer, and so depending on the actual length of the barricade, the mute jammer will protect more of it or less of it. Now, in this case, it's noticeable that from the area of effect, there's actually the possibility for making a head level hole right here with Hibana or even putting a hard breach charge there. And so it doesn't fully protect the wall. And so somebody would say, well, yeah, this is why Bandit's better, because when you put Bandits down, it's the entire wall is protected. There's no way they're going to be able to squeeze any sort of charge in there. Well, the problem with that is that you can also use two individual mute jammers for the same thing to achieve almost as good of an effect. And the downside for Bandit in this case is that Bandit is forced to use one bandit per wall no matter what. He can't place one in the middle to give lesser protection to both walls. He has to always put one per barricade. And what this means is that he doesn't have the ability to prioritize walls. What this means is, let's say that there's a really contested wall that I know is more likely to be breached. I know people are going to be really, really trying to get this wall. Then I can put two to prevent it from being breached through the little opening over here, because now it's covering all the way to above head level. And so, yeah, it uses just as many as Bandit. But now, with the other two walls, let's say these walls are less of a priority. Right here and right there. I put one right here. It allows me to spread out my utility, to give a lesser degree of protection for other walls, and then more of a degree of protection for a single wall. And so, with Bandit, I would only be able to fully protect two walls and not protect a third wall whatsoever. But with Mute, I can protect three walls, two partially, and then one fully. Or four different walls partially. And so it gives me more decision of how I want to do wall denial. And it's also important to note that when you have wall denial from a mute, a lot of the times they won't even actually be able to make a hole that's vaultable. So let's say you have Habana, they might be able to get a line of sight on you from the very edges here, but they can't walk through. And so much like with a barricade, where it's up because you want to prevent them from walking through without a sound cue, if you're standing in front of it, they can just hit it and shoot. So obviously, like I discussed in my other video, you want to always hide yourself from even fully closed barricades that you're not prepared for to defend, because they can just come up, hit, and get a free line of sight on you. And so if you're not going to be standing in a certain area, or you don't have to worry about your back being to the wall as much, it's not as big of a deal if they breach a little bit of the side, because they still aren't able to really take space off of it. Now, as the title says, Mute is a better pick than Bandit most of the time, but not every single time. And there are very specific instances where Bandit might be a better choice. One of these instances is when there are no walls to actually prioritize in a site like this, where there are only two main walls worth defending that lead to the outside of the site and provide an advantage to attackers if they are opened, because it minimizes your ability to cover certain positions. And so these two walls are very important. Now, you could obviously do the same thing that Bandit does, which is put two mute jammers, let's say, on both walls, and they are almost protected just as well, if not just as well, because you can't repel outside either of these walls to breach from above the head level, which is something we're going to talk about later. Let's just say that utility does the job equally as good, whether it's mute or bandit. We have something else to think about now, and that is the movement speed and the gun. Now, bandit has a better movement speed, and he has a better gun with higher damage per second and a faster fire rate, giving him an advantage in gunfights. And so, in this situation, bandit might very well be a better choice because the advantages that mute has may not grant you an advantage in this scenario. Now, the same logic also applies to Cade in this scenario. If your goal is to deny both of the main walls, then it's obvious that Cade has, like Mute, a worse primary automatic and a worse movement speed. Now, specifically with this site, you might be playing Cade to deny the hatch, and the ability to deny hatches is an advantage that Cade has over both Mute and Bandit. But aside from that, if your goal is to get both of these main walls because your team doesn't have any other hard breach denial besides you, then obviously Bandit would also be a better choice. Now, another example of a situation where Bandit is better than Mute, which I mentioned, was where attackers are able to repel directly outside of a wall, such as this wall on border. And because if you put down two Mute jammers, they may not be able to get to the sides, but they will be able to place their thermite charge above the head level and then blow the entire thing open to right around down here. And so, because Bandit is able to cover the entire barricade all the way up to past head level, this gives Bandit an advantage when denying breach. Now this season there's been an interesting development with the new operator that perhaps most people haven't noticed, and that is that the operator has a slow reload LMG. And because of that and the reputation that these guns have for being disadvantageous, most people have been using the DMR. And the reason why these guns are disadvantageous is because, like I said, they're slow reloading. Although they might have 100 bullets, after the 100 bullets is out, you're in a very vulnerable position being forced to reload or switch to a secondary, which is usually a pistol. Example would be with Capital. The only secondary he has is a pistol if he's going to use this gun. Same thing with this operator, only a pistol. And every other operator that has a slow reload LMG, not to be confused with regular reload LMGs. These LMGs reload almost as fast as rifles, and in fact, it does have a secondary automatic for Amaru. But any operator that has a slow reloading LMG does not have a secondary automatic to rely on. And so when they run out of bullets, they're forced to rely on a weapon that is perhaps not as effective. What this means is people usually refrain from ever using them because it puts them in vulnerable positions more often than a rifle that can reload faster. But this unique scenario with the new operator is that they actually do have a secondary automatic, and they're the only operator in the game with a slow reload LMG and a secondary weapon that's also an automatic. And so how you can choose to use the operator is if you're not good with DMRs, you can use the LMG until you run out of the 100 bullets and then switch to your secondary automatic and only reload your LMG when you know that it's safe instead of being forced to reload it, otherwise being forced to rely on a pistol, a tap fire pistol. And so this is why this is a very unique combination and a unique development. It makes a slow reload LMG not as much of a disadvantage as it used to be. Now, something I see a lot of people not doing that they really should be doing on attack is droning immediately once they see that they're in an XV1 situation. This means that you could be just the last person left on your team, and then there's one person left on the enemy team, or you could have 4 guys left on your team, and there's somebody else. There's only one person on the enemy team. Any XV1 scenario where there is one person on the enemy team, you need to immediately stop everything and drone that person. Now, the answer to why you should do this and why this is a different thing than droning in, let's say, an XV2 even, or an XV3 or whatever, when there's more than one person in the enemy team, this difference is best explained by why droning is really easy in a 1v1 and why it's really difficult and tedious in a 5v5. Each individual player has one drone, and with one drone, you can only see so much. So if I have only one opponent on my enemy team, if I drone that person and I see that they're right here, I am looking at essentially every single person at once. And I know, without droning anywhere else, exactly how much space I can take. I know that he's not there. I know that he's not there. I know that he's nowhere else. There is nobody else that I have to worry about besides that one person. And so that makes droning really easy. But that is different in a 5v5. In a 5v5, I only have one drone, and I might be looking at one guy. So it could be a guy over here, be a guy over there, whatever. I have almost no information on them because the proportional amount of information that I have at once is extremely limited. Whereas in a 1v1, I have 100% of the information. I see everyone. In a 5v5, when there's everyone still alive, I'm seeing a very small portion of everything that I need to see. And so I don't immediately always know how much space I need to take, which is why droning on attack at the beginning of a round is usually like a sort of systematic clearing. It's very tedious. So let's say I'm down here. I'm droning. I have to check here. Nobody's here. Okay, now I'm going to check into here. Nobody's here. Then I check over here so I know I can walk into here. There's nobody here. I'm doing this not because I'm looking for a specific person, but I'm having to check every little thing to see how much space I can take, because just looking at a person, just going and finding somebody, doesn't tell me what I need to know, because there's a billion other more people that I can't physically possibly see all at once. And so that problem goes away when you're in an XV1 in much the same way that it does when you're just playing a custom 1v1. And so you always, always, always need to throw out a drone as soon as you see there's one guy left.